have for 2-week time?
Oh, we do mostly, it's first run commercial.
Footage in this DocFest?
This will be our 4th year.
Okay.
And basically I created it, I founded it, created it, and it's like going. I don't really want to, I never wanted to do that as a career.
How many people do you... So I'm going to try and keep it just to the 9/11.
So where were you before here 3 years ago? In the vineyard?
Well then, I actually worked for an independent production company in Boston as well for a year. So,
Where did you go to school?
UMass, Amherst. And then I graduated, and when I graduated the first summer, I went to the vineyard, and then I lived on the vineyard for the year, and then I did another summer, and then I went to Boston, and then New York.
We're rolling, Doug.
Okay. She's in. Okay. So I'm just going to ask you some general information to start off with. So if you could just tell me your name and tell me what you do for a living and where you live.
Gary Pollard, and I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I live downtown on Maiden Lane.
How far away is
I'm
Maiden?
sorry, Gary. Your chair's just a little bit flat, so actually, if you want to stand up, I'd like to go before.
There.
I'll do that again.
You were fine.
So if you want to answer that again, and can you also tell me how far away from where you live it is to the World Trade Center?
My name is Gary Pollard, and I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I live on Maiden Lane, which is about 5 blocks due east of the Trade Center.
How long have you lived in the neighborhood?
Oh, over 15 years, almost 20 years.
So tell me about the morning of 9/11. How did you first know something wasn't right?
Turn off the camera for a second. I don't know.
Okay, so
All right. So how I heard about
so
it.
yeah, once again, if you can just tell me how your day began on 9/11. What was the first indication that you had that something wasn't right?
Well, unfortunately, I had a kind of double tragedy. My mom passed away a few days before 9/11, and her funeral was on Monday, 9/10. That night, I couldn't fall asleep. Finally fell asleep around 4 in the morning. And I think I was awoken. I heard a couple of crashes, which apparently I realized later were the planes hitting the World Trade Center. And I just rolled over. I thought it was a truck crash. I didn't know what it was. I was really exhausted and kind of out of it. At one point, I was awoken to the point where I got out of bed, looked out the window, because I heard people screaming, it sounded like children almost screaming. I distinctly thought it was a bunch of children running and screaming, but I looked out the window, it was office workers, and I looked up, because I have a view of the Trade Center, and saw what was happening. And, gathered my thoughts briefly. My camera was ready to go, basically, and I went up to the roof first. Did a little shooting from there, and then went downstairs and worked my way up Maiden Lane, eventually right, to a block away of the Trade Center on Broadway and Maiden Lane. Then I made my way south a couple blocks where I thought I had a better vantage point, and a little bit further away to where I think it was Rector and Broadway, just south of Trinity Church. And we were all, meaning me and all the other pedestrians, just hanging around on Broadway, all the office workers that had, evacuated their buildings, just looking up at the Trade Center. So I just shot scenes of, I was basically shooting from handheld without a tripod, shots of the Trade Center, and then just back and forth from the Trade Center to the people. That's all there really was going on. Everyone was just standing around, kind of not in a hurry to move anywhere. Nobody thought the building was going to collapse.
So when you first went up on your roof and you brought your camera, now I assume that the reason why your camera is ready to go is you're a documentary filmmaker. You never know when there's going to be something going on that you're going to need your camera for. Is that right?
Yes and no. And it's not like documentary filmmaking isn't quite like news gathering where you're running out the door like this. Just so happened it was ready and prepared, and I had tape and the battery was charged by luck. It's not, yeah, but I try to keep the equipment ready.
So when you first got up to the roof and you saw the World Trade Center burning and you're shooting, are you thinking, like, can you even recall what your thoughts were at that point?
I just assumed it was an accident. I mean, we never had been attacked. Well, I guess Pearl Harbor, but in New York City, who would have thought about an attack, especially that kind of an attack? Who would have imagined someone could or would? I think it's a matter of would. Who would think someone would do that? The could is obviously, it's pretty easy now that we look back at it, but who would have thought that someone would do that? And so, I just assumed it was an accident.
Did you know that 2 airplanes had struck when you started shooting? Did you know what caused these big holes in the Trade Center?
No, I didn't know. When I went down, before I went out, actually, I turned CNN on for a moment, and then I realized what had happened.
And when you first got to the street, describe for me, if you can recall, what you saw when you first got out there and started shooting.
Well, by then, the people had stopped running, and they were basically just milling about, conversing with one another in shock. Not really talking too much, but just looking at each other, and then looking up at the building, then looking at each other, in awe of what was going on.
Can you describe for me some of the expressions on these people's faces when you were shooting?
People were just looked forlorn, sad, confused, making, expressions that, let's see, how would I describe it? I don't know, as if they just witnessed something really horrible.
I'm wondering what it was about these people's faces that drew you to shoot them, because you shot, quite a little bit of footage of them, of these different faces, and I'm wondering.
That just goes back to my filmmaking training. I remember in film school, one of the professors saying, that's not close enough. You're not in close. Reviewing material. And I learned, over time, you really have to get, what a close-up really is, so that's just from training.
Did you somehow feel different because you had a camera in your hand at this point as you were shooting these people looking up at the towers, and you had your camera in your hand and you're looking through the viewfinder? Did you somehow feel different than these people who were experiencing the same thing?
I don't think so, because unlike normally if I'm working on a documentary, I know what I know what I'm doing. I came with a reason, a purpose. I'm focused. I was just as confused and dumbfounded as everyone. I just happened to have a camera and I knew how to use it better than some of the amateurs who happened to be there also shooting by chance. No, I was totally, I wasn't thinking about making a film. I was really, and even since I shot the material, I never thought I had a film. I have not tried to make it into a film. I'm glad that you're able to use my material and do something in a bigger picture. But I never thought, like I said, I'm not a news cameraman. I never thought of selling it, really. I just happened to be there, and it was history. It seemed like history in the making. I look at it as a document.
Now, do you remember what it sounded when you were down shooting these people looking up at the buildings? What did it feel like to be on the street at that moment? Were people, gasping in, horror? Was there sirens? What did it feel like to be there at that moment?
Just confused. Like how could this happen? People were some women, some men were gasping and making, kind of sighing and crying, consoling one another. Basically everybody, I think felt it was identical. I mean, for everybody, it was just dumbfounded that this was happening. Also, I don't, thank God where we were, or at least I guess when I arrived, it's funny because I you rethink these things. After it was all over, I felt, what kind of idiot am I walking towards this, just to photograph it. I did want to photograph it, instinctually. And I thought, what an idiot to walking towards this, disaster. And it's funny, I thought to myself, if the events were different, if my mom had not passed away, the timing was different, if I hadn't gone to sleep that night, 4 a.m, I would have normally woken up like 7:30, 8 o'clock, and I would have witnessed probably the second plane hitting, maybe even shot it. But I thought to myself, I would have been up already. I would have been made my way up Maiden Lane to Broadway and beyond. When I got to Broadway, the police were already blocking it off. You couldn't go any further. I'm almost sure, if the chain of events hadn't happened the way they did, I would have been much closer than I was when the building collapsed. And, I could have been killed. I don't know if I would have been closer than I already was. So I couldn't help but think about that afterwards. And nothing's no photograph or story is worth getting killed for. And I personally don't like news photographers, paparazzi type, and the war photographers. I think it's more of a business to them, as opposed to journalists who go in to write a story. I've met and I've listened and I've watched news photographers, film photographers and cameramen, and it's a combination of thrill-seeking and a business because they want to sell their material. They want to have good material to sell. And
would you say, though, that there's a bit of a filmmaker instinct in you, though, obviously in a historical moment like you were experiencing on 9/11, that did make you want to get the story like the next person, to capture as much as you could about what it felt like to be living during those moments?
Yeah, I guess like I said, I didn't really think too much. Instinctually, I've been doing still photography since I was a kid. So just instinctually, I grabbed my camera and figured this was worthwhile shooting. Although, like I said, nobody anticipated the building collapsing. We're a block away, and nobody thought it was going to collapse. Police obviously didn't. They would have pushed people back much further.
So tell me, after you were down, I think you were in front of 33 Maiden Lane. Was that the address that you shot?
At one point, yeah. I mean, that was like 2 blocks from Broadway.
And then where did you go from there?
I continued basically west on Maiden Lane. Maiden Lane runs east-west. It turns into the World Trade Center. I mean, it directly runs right into them. So I was just continuing to walk closer towards the centers.
And tell me what happened when the building began to fall. Do you remember seeing the building begin to crumble?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. It was just the sound. I'll never forget the sound that I heard as it fell. I just happened, as I said, I was shooting. There was not much happening. I mean, so to speak. A lot of people were lined up on Broadway behind police tape, or no, just policemen were just keeping people at a certain distance. And they were basically looking up at the building, looking at each other, looking up at the building, and I was photographing people's faces, the building burning, some wide shots, some close-ups. I happened to be, doing this back and forth, and at the right moment, I had a very tight shot where the plane had penetrated the South Tower. And through the viewfinder, as I'm looking, first you hear the beginning of the sound of this, like thunder. Also, first thing I saw were bits of the building falling, like almost like big pieces of snow or something. And I got where I was, and other people said the same thing afterwards that were in my vicinity. We thought, and you can see in the footage I think I have, it looked like just the portion of the building from where the plane hit to the top had fallen, and it looked. I mean, my first reaction was it would kind of fell towards our direction, and I thought, oh my God. And everyone was in shock. I was very tight, and I, luckily and instinctually widened the lens, and you saw the whole thing collapse. But because of the smoke and dust, immediately you couldn't tell the rest of it collapsed. And as I said, as you can see in the material, it looks like it's falling towards us, and it looks like just the top portion where the plane had hit to the top of the building came disconnected from the rest of it and fell. So it wasn't until later until someone told me that the whole building actually collapsed.
What did you do when you're looking through the viewfinder and you start to see, like you said, it looked like snow or something? What did you do at that moment? Do you remember do you remember seeing it through the viewfinder and knowing that there was, this building is going?
Yeah. Yeah. I widened the lens, I widened out so I could see more of the building because I was in very close at that point. And then I kept widening out, and I ran a few steps back, and then I realized I was far enough away. I mean, the building had already been, at least with the top half had fallen, and I luckily was not in harm's way. So I realized looked like I felt safe where I was, so instead of continuing to run, I stopped and I kept shooting. I widened out more and I tilted down a little bit. You saw the big plumes of smoke and dust and ash billowing into the air. People running in a panic, running by me. Some people had fallen. And all of a sudden I tilt down more to street level. On a Broadway to my right, Broadway is this giant plume of smoke coming towards me. I don't know what was going through my head. I stayed there and I kept shooting that shot until I was enveloped in debris. And then I ran not far away into a lobby where a lot of people had already run into. And it's funny because I didn't really look at the material for days. I didn't want to look at it. And until a friend kind of urged me to, I stayed in the neighborhood, and a friend, third or fourth day, came down with some groceries because there was nobody to get food in the neighborhood, and he urged me, let's look at the material. Let's look at that day. The building, collapsed. Do you think you shot it? Do you think I recalled I shot it. But as I thought, my recollection was that I ran immediately once the building started falling. That was my recollection. And when I looked at it, I said, oh my God, why did I stand there? What an idiot am I? Anyway, I'm just...
Where, now, it looked like you were right next to Trinity Church. Is that,
Yeah.
Can you just tell me, where you were when you were shooting this and how close that is to the World Trade Center?
Right. Well, like I said, Maiden Lane runs east-west. It runs right into the World Trade Center. I'm at the very eastern end, and I walked west all the way towards Broadway, which is 1 block from the Trade Center. Shot a little bit of what was going on there, not just basically pedestrians looking in awe of what's going on. And I made my way south on Broadway, 2 blocks just south of Trinity Church. And there was kind of an open viewpoint from there without any other skyscrapers between me and the Trade Center. So I stopped there and shot a little bit, and that's when the first tower fell.
When the first tower fell and you were standing there shooting and people are running by you, what was it like to be there at that moment?
It's very hard to recall any kind of feeling, specific feeling. I basically, I don't think I was feeling anything at the time. Shock. And I felt safe. Like I said, the building had already, or at least a portion of the building I thought fell. I didn't realize the whole building had collapsed, but I realized I was far enough away. Well, my guess was I was far enough away and safe. Luckily, it turns out I was.
Did you feel, while you're watching this, did you all of a sudden feel like a sense of fear come over you I can't even imagine being that close to
Yeah,
seeing this
my
building.
heart was pounding, and I guess now that you mention it, I must have felt afraid. I must have felt fear. And my heart was definitely pounding, and it's, put it this way, whatever the feeling was, and I can't describe it, and I can't really recall it precisely, I'd never felt like that before. I've never been in any kind of a situation like that. It's just shock.
As you're seeing people run by you, tell me again, did you see anybody fall?
Yeah, as soon as the building fell, or moments later, I was tilting down to get it. What was happening on the street, and people were, yelling, screaming, crying, rushing by me. And unfortunately, in the panic, a woman had fallen, and luckily there was a policeman nearby, and a number of people helped her get up, and then kept running.
Did people think that did anybody say, run or move or anything?
No, it was like every man for themselves, every man for yourself, every man for
himself.
For yourself. Wait.
Himself.
It was every man for himself. Nobody noticed me. Nobody said, get out of here. It was like, I'm getting out of here. I don't care what anyone else is doing. That seemed to be the operating procedure. And I think the police, were the only ones that had enough, frame of mind and professional, this is their job, to help people. Well, I should say, when this one woman fell, a policeman and a number of other people helped her get up. And then they continued running.
Now, did Trinity Church, was that a landmark that you had been familiar with prior to 9/11?
Yeah, 'cause I lived in the neighborhood. Subway's there. It's, you know, stands out. This beautiful old church surrounded by skyscrapers.
And did you, I mean, now that you stopped there because you basically weren't going any further, but was there another reason that you happened to, you know, stop at that particular spot?
Only because, like I said earlier, it had a better vantage point. Because the church is low, it didn't obscure the view of the Trade Center. So it was sure what I thought was a better shot.
When the first building fell and you started to run, you eventually ran into a lobby. Tell me where you ran when you decided to get out amongst the debris.
It's funny because, you know, I went back, you know, eventually a week or two later to try and find the lobby I went into. And I had a hard time finding it. I thought I knew exactly where it was. But in the smoke and everything, I guess I didn't really, I didn't know, I had no idea. And I have a very good sense of direction and where I am and where I've been and where I'm going, hopefully. It was very funny because I walked up and down Broadway and I couldn't find the lobby I went into. And finally I did. And it was further away than I recalled. I thought it was closer. I guess I had run further than I realized.
What did it feel like when this debris sort of made its way towards you? To actually have that on your skin, what did that feel like to you, and what did it smell like?
Well, immediately, you know, it all happened so fast. Immediately, you're not. I can't remember if I thought anything. I'm sure I was in a semi-state of panic myself. I mean, when I started running, once I was enveloped in the smoke, I realized, okay, this is dangerous. You know, smoke inhalation. Who knows what was falling? I mean, working its way towards me. And then I felt scared, and I ran. I just ran. It wasn't until a few days later that terrible, it was obviously, I was depressed and sad. My mother died and all, it was a range of emotions. I couldn't tell if I was upset because of my mom or all the people who were just killed, or both. It was both. In a way, it's funny because this horrible tragedy distracted me from thinking of my mom's death just days before. And it wasn't a good distraction, but it was a distraction. And it wasn't until a few days later, and that day I wandered around shooting, after the building had, both buildings had fallen. And I was just walking around the neighborhood shooting the debris, the dust, people's hats, shoes by themselves in the ash, pieces of paper burnt around the edges. But it wasn't until, a few days had gone by and I realized, and I came home eventually, and I was encrusted with dust and ash, and my hair, it was like powdery. If it went like this, it was like that character in Pigpen. But it was a horrible feeling came upon me. I thought I was thinking about the whole thing at one point at home. And I realized I had kind of the cremated remains of people, not just me, but everyone who was there had fallen on us. And that really, it was horrible, sad feeling to realize. When I realized that was very depressing moment.
When this debris cloud came towards you, going back to when the first building collapsed, and it's basically engulfing you, could you even, can you inhale? Can you breathe at that point? What do you?
Well, you breathe naturally. It's involuntary, and I think I covered my mouth. I think I pulled my shirt up instinctively over my nose and mouth and breathe, to act as a little filter. And I didn't have any problems, actually, then or since then, thank God. That was my biggest concern, staying in the neighborhood, for the next 10 days, was the air quality. And if I was putting myself at risk. I got home eventually about 2 or 3 that afternoon after shooting street scenes and just the general mayhem of the aftermath. I got home, the power was off, and I thought, okay, I'm leaving town tomorrow morning. Next morning, I thought, okay, I'm going to stay one more day and leave tomorrow. Every morning I was saying, all right, I'm going to leave tomorrow. And I knew I wasn't staying because I was a filmmaker, because I knew there was no real film to be made, and I wasn't in the mood to make a film if there was one. But instinctually I knew it wasn't. But it's funny, I don't know, I wasn't sure what was keeping me, but as days went on, I felt something was compelling me to stay there. And the more I thought about it, I realized, okay, this is my home. I'd gone through a horrible tragedy with my mom dying, this tragedy. Where do you want to be the most when you're feeling the worst? Home. And I lived in that neighborhood for years. And that was why I actually stayed for 10 days with no electricity. If someone had told me, I've thought about this occasionally, if I didn't have electricity, how long I could survive. I never thought I could get through 24 hours. But, I had candles, luckily. And I ran into a couple of neighbors I didn't even know that ended up staying too, and we kind of bonded, and I think we helped each other get through the next week.
So going back to when the first tower collapsed and you're running out,
I got to talk to him
in the
off the
middle
record
of
if you don't mind.
this debris cloud, and you realize that this isn't this isn't smart for me to be standing here anymore. I have to do something. I have to get out of it. Tell me, when you were in the middle of that cloud, what did you do? Bring me back to that moment. What did you feel like?
I just panicked. I thought, okay, now I don't feel safe. I got to run as fast as I can and get shelter. And I don't remember if I turned off the camera right away. I don't think I did. I just started running. And I didn't realize I ran, I guess, like maybe 3 blocks. I thought I had ducked into a building sooner than I did. But it was just a panic, like, get out of here. Save yourself.
And were other people running with you?
Everyone was gone by then. Everyone had ran before I did. There wasn't really anyone, maybe a couple of people. When I got into the lobby, people were still coming down in the elevators to, get it down from the upper floors. I think they were told to. And the policeman, there was one policeman in the lobby who seemed to have his head on his shoulders and basically calmed everyone.
Please leave
the
area.
He was calm, everyone else seemed to be calm, and basically instructed everyone to stay put. Don't go outside. You could be injured from the smoke inhalation. So I felt comfortable and fine immediately in the lobby until 5 minutes went by, 10 minutes. Little by little, the lobby is getting all smoky, and basically through the cracks in the doors, in the entrance doors. It was engulfed. The building was totally engulfed in smoke, ash, whatever all this debris was. And it was working its way into the building, and I was like coughing. Everyone was starting to cough in the lobby. And I started getting nervous, like, we can't go outside. Where do we go from here? It didn't get, luckily, that bad, to a point where it was dangerous to be in the lobby. In fact, when the police instructed everyone to leave the lobby and get out of the neighborhood on foot, it was actually it was clearer outside than it was inside, because the air was moving. but the smoke that entered the lobby just stagnant, and we were like kind of stuck there breathing it.
How did you come across this lobby? As you're running down the street and you're trying to get out of this cloud, how did you pick this building?
I don't even know. I mean, I couldn't see anything. It was just dumb luck, I guess. I mean, I guess I could see a little bit, enough to see the steps. I just ran, and like I said, I probably saw someone, the lights. I think I saw the lights of the lobby through the smoke, and that's what brought me to that building.
What was this building, do you know?
It was an office building. It was an older office building, not a modern one. Broadway has a lot of beautiful older office buildings, Lower Broadway. And I don't know what particular,
When you walked in, bring me back to that moment when you walked in, you're running out of the, you open the door, or did somebody open the door for you and you walk into this lobby? What is the scene like in there once you get in there, and how did you feel at that moment leaving, knowing that you were safe?
Well, the first thing I noticed when I walked in was a policeman immediately, kind of hurriedly walking through the lobby, instructing everyone, he was saying, get down, don't face the windows. I remember him saying that, and everybody. So when I first got in there, people were like huddled along the wall of the lobby on either side. And as people came down in the elevators, they did the same. Some people were walking as well. Everybody was in shock and panicked and crying. A lot of women were crying. Men and women were hugging each other, consoling one another. One man got very panicked, kind of lost it. He wanted to leave the lobby, but the policeman had instructed them not to. He yelled something like, I could tell he was not handling it. It was affecting him dramatically, and he yelled something like, "Oh, they're keeping us in here. They won't let us out." And he was upset. Everybody was upset.
Did you guys know that the tower had collapsed? Are you still thinking it's just a portion of the tower that had fallen?
Yes, I didn't know the whole building had collapsed at that point. None of us did.
So
we just ran. First of all, I don't think most people happen to be, I happened to be focused very close on the building at the time it collapsed. I'll just take a guess. As I said, people on the street were lined up, looking at one another, back and forth. They were looking at each other, looking at the building, looking at each other, looking at the building. So I'm sure some people just heard it, saw the smoke and ran. The big dust cloud. Everyone started running, and you run with them. I don't think many of us knew immediately the whole building collapsed.
So as you're in the lobby at this point, how are the groups organized? Is it people that know each other that are, together? How did people organize themselves once you got in?
Well, I could gather from the way people were huddled together that they were co-workers, more than likely. You could tell right away, pretty much. These were office workers that were basically helping one another, consoling one another, trying to calm each other down, to make sense of what happened. Trying to figure out what to do next.
Did you meet any people, or did you hear of any people in the lobby that said, "I know somebody in that building," or "I just came from that building"?
Yeah, there was so much kind of confusion and talking, I couldn't really focus too much on what I heard, frankly. And I remember one gentleman who was covered in dust very sincerely was concerned about his other co-workers. He kept saying something like, "I had to go back." It was like, my people were there. I had to go back for my people. Like he must have been the supervisor or manager of the office. And, he was obviously very distraught. But he kept saying a couple of times, "my people." Like he felt obliged, and they were working with him, under him, and he was, rightfully upset.
Describe for me again, when that building fell, what it sounded like.
It's like a sound I never heard before, obviously. I hope I never hear again until the second building fell. It was, the only thing came close to was like thunder, but it wasn't quite like thunder, but I don't know, it was just something like, kind of like metal crunching, and it's indescribable. But the sound haunts me. For quite a while, if I heard anything loud after that, it made me jump, and I was upset. It was strange, but that was the one thing that really, and it's gone away since then. But I was very sensitive to loud noises for months after that.
So at what point did you decide that it was okay to leave the lobby? How did you make that decision that it was okay to leave?
Basically, because it was clearer outside. There was less smoke outside the front window, the front doors of the lobby, than there was inside. I think the policeman made that call and started instructing people to leave.
So tell me, when you left the lobby and you're walking out, you have your camera on, what is it like when you first walk outside after that? Tell me what it looked like.
Well, that morning, must have been the most beautiful blue sky I've ever seen in New York. I mean, it's rare you get a deep blue sky like that morning. And all of a sudden, you're like in a London fog. You can't see the sun. It's dark, cloudy. It looked like it would be a cloudy, horrible, rainy day, but it wasn't. It was just ash and smoke. I actually, at one point, pointed my camera towards the sun. What was supposed to be the sun. Right on Wall Street. I was walking right along Broadway and Wall, and the sun happened to be right there, down Wall. And, ordinarily it would burn out the picture, but it didn't, because there was so much ash and smoke in the air. And, the ground was covered. I mean, it was very disorienting, paper, thick ash, like, varied maybe 6 inches to 12 inches, depending on how it drifted. And people's hats. The sad part was people's articles of clothing, hats, shoes, mixed in with the ash, the papers. And, I was very distraught, having watched people die. I mean, I don't think I've ever, I mean, if you're lucky, you've never had to witness someone dying. Even though I didn't see it, they weren't 5 feet in front of me. I knew I just watched a lot of people die, and who was prepared for that? And that was, what kept going through my head, that I just witnessed this horrible tragedy of people dying.
So, did you think, as you made your way out on the street, and where was your destination as you got out, when you got out?
Well, I left the lobby after the first building had fallen, the dust settled enough for us to walk outside. And the police instructed everyone to walk as quickly as they could, east or north, away from the site. Because I was a photographer, cameraman, a filmmaker, I didn't follow the police's instructions, and I hung around on Broadway and kept shooting. And then I had my back. You couldn't, if I point the camera towards the second tower, which was still up at the time, you couldn't see anything of the tower because it was just a cloud of dust and smoke. And I was just walking up Broadway filming a variety of things. People's hats, shoes, people also walking away in shock. And I remember there was this marble or granite, huge, very large tribute to Harry Helmsley. And it was covered, I'd seen it before many times, and it was covered with ash in a very odd way. You could still read the sign, but it seemed very ironic. I don't know, it was weird, so I photographed that. So that's on the east side of Broadway. So my back is like towards the Trade Center. That's still standing. All of a sudden, I heard that sound again. I remember hearing the first time. I turned the camera off immediately and I ran. I didn't wait around for like the first time. I just said, okay. I was lucky enough I didn't, get killed the first time. I'm not going to stand there the second time. And I ran into a different lobby that was the closest building. I think it was the closest building.
Did you think after you made your way outside, first of all, when you left the first lobby and you go out into the streets and you said that there's ash on the ground and, is there ash still coming through the air? Are there papers still floating through the air?
Oh yeah, it was like snowing lightly at the time. I mean, most of the heavy stuff had fallen by then, but there was stuff in the air everywhere.
Could you see clearly in front of you?
Yeah, it was clear enough. You could see very well.
And what were people doing out on the streets?
Basically just trying to get out of the neighborhood, walking quickly away.
Did you see people that were visibly upset or injured?
No, everyone was upset. I didn't see anyone injured.
So, what did Trinity Church look like after the first tower collapsed? What did the debris look like?
Well, there's an old cemetery still exists. It must be, 200 or 300 years old. And it was very eerie because, there was this ash and debris sitting on top of the tombstones. So, and there was a, iron gate that was covered. And I was immediately drawn to that as an image, and I made a couple of shots of the cemetery. Also, I remember there was a shoe shine stand. I know when I go to the subway, there's these shoe shine stands right on the sidewalk that I've seen for years. Obviously, they were abandoned at this stage, but they were, it was a very eerie image that it was just this still sitting there on the sidewalk, covered with ash.
Did you, at any point, as you're filming, think about or hear any numbers as pertaining to the number of people who may have just lost their lives?
No, we didn't have that kind of information available at that point.
But you knew that there was a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I just seen what I thought. Well, I think at a certain point in time when I was walking on the street, it became, someone said, okay, either police or I'd overheard someone mention the whole building had collapsed. And then I knew I'd witnessed who knows how many thousands. I had no idea. I had no idea of the numbers. I wasn't thinking of numbers. Listen, I think I'd be just as upset if I saw one person die. I would be. 1 or 1,000 or 5,000. It's just as upsetting. Well, I guess it's more upsetting than thousands of people dying. But I'd be very upset if I saw one person die in front of my face. Who wouldn't be?
Do you remember what any of these papers said? Or did you shoot?
No. I did pick up a couple of them as, I don't know, I wasn't sure if it was morbid or appropriate to do that, but I thought it was important as a to remember, I guess, what had happened.
So, did you know, what did you think after you left the lobby when the first building collapsed, that this may happen again?
No, I don't think I wasn't thinking very clearly because, no, I didn't think about the other building falling. I'm a pretty practical-minded person. Very pride myself on that, but you know what? It's funny. Didn't even think about it. Now, obviously, it was an obvious deduction I should have made, but it didn't even occur to me. I don't know why. I was just like dazed and confused to a degree. But I did know enough, I had enough sense to run immediately when I heard that sound again.
Do you remember how soon it was after you left the lobby that you heard that sound again?
10 minutes, maybe less. And I think we were in the lobby, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. I don't recall, according to the actual timeline, how long between the first and second building collapsing, but...
Did you talk to other people after you left the lobby and before the second tower collapsed, or did you hear other people, anybody saying like, watch out, this thing's gonna collapse, or did you hear, were other people thinking, were other people trying to do what you were doing, moving closer again?
No, most people were walking away. I mean, there wasn't many, after the first building fell, there was hardly anybody left in the immediate vicinity. I mean, once the smoke and dust had cleared enough for us to walk, there was just some, stragglers like myself. There was the police, fire rescue, ambulances, and I do remember walking along Broadway and getting to a corner that went east-west, and to the left was where the buildings had fallen, and it was calm on the part of Broadway that was blocked by the buildings. But when I got to the corner, to the street, the cross street, there was this whoosh, this wind, or I guess the heat or something pushing, the air. Debris was shooting horizontally. And I stopped dead in my tracks, said, I'm not walking beyond here, and caught in that. And I turned and ran. That was eerie.
So there was no, you really didn't encounter, people then saying, yeah, I'm just curious, because I understand your way of thinking that you didn't think the second building was going to collapse, because neither did I. And I didn't think, I was thinking, look at now we're going to have one tower. What's that going to be like? That's going to be pretty strange just to have one tower up and one tower's down. And I think...
I didn't even get that far in my thought process.
I was just curious if you felt that other people had similar,
Well, anyone in that close vicinity was just thinking, let's get out of here. Let's move further away, I think.
Except you.
Except for myself and a few other people.
So, when the second tower came down and you ran, how did you take shelter again?
Well, it was all vague. I mean, I couldn't really remember that lobby. I tried finding that lobby also. That was easier. I found that one quicker than the first one. When I went back days later, out of curiosity, I wanted to see where I ran into. But, it was just instinct. You just, see a door, and I ran into it. And moments later, I turned back to look out the front doors. They're all glass. I couldn't believe it. It was pitch black. Absolutely pitch black. Then I was scared. I was thinking, what horrible thing's going to happen next?
When you say it was pitch black, are we talking like black as night? I mean.
Yeah, black as night. You can see, I think, in the shot I have, it looks like, it doesn't look like windows. I mean, it looks like the front doors are painted black. You can see a little bit of light from a street light, maybe, but that's about it.
Who were the people in that lobby? Do you remember? Describe for me what the people were, what they looked like in that lobby.
Well, when I first walked in, I could tell there was the building management doing, safety checks, making sure everyone was gone. And there was a gentleman that had a mask on, who had obviously come from outside, very tall, and I overheard him saying he was a fire marshal. He said, "Are you sure everyone's evacuated from the upper floors?" They said yes. And I kind of walked with him towards the front doors again, and we conversed briefly. Apparently his wife was in the neighborhood somewhere. I guess I don't know if they had got separated or what. But he oddly enough, I guess, seemed to think his wife was okay, and there was nothing, he could do at the moment for his wife. But all of a sudden he looks at me and says, "I got to go back out there and see if there's anyone stuck out there." I couldn't believe it, and I paused for a moment, and I actually followed him out the front door, and I could see him. There were people out there that hadn't been able to find an open door because it was so dark. So he called and said, "Is anyone out here?" And they heard his voice. They followed the sound of his voice. I stayed close to the lobby door. I didn't follow him out into the street too far. And then I saw these guys making their way, and I kind of yelled this way, and I opened the door for them. And they were totally covered in ash, coughing, trying to get out of their throat. And luckily, I think they were okay, but they were real frightened and had trouble breathing. Luckily, there was the building personnel had brought jugs of water for them to rinse their throat and rinse their face.
So, when you were in that lobby there, it looked like there was a man who was getting sick. Do you remember that?
It was coughing. Choking, kind of. I think they just, couldn't breathe, and they had this debris. They had to breathe while they were out there. I guess they ingested some of this material, and it was making them cough dramatically. But I think with the water, luckily they seemed okay soon after.
So you've, at this point, have just lived through two huge events. I mean, first the planes hitting the towers and then the towers falling. At any point, did you think to yourself, "Oh my God, I'm alive"?
Yeah, I thought to myself, why did I even come from the safety of 5 or 6 blocks away to this close? I felt foolish that I had subjected myself to that kind of danger just for the sake of filming it.
So, when you went out after the second building collapsed, you went outside. Judging from your video, it looks even darker now, than it was after the first tower collapsed. It was really black.
Yeah. No, after the first building fell, it was cloudy, so to speak, and smoky. But you could see images through the smoke. after the second building, I couldn't believe it. It just, within moments, it was pitch black. And I imagine it was the combination of the debris from the first collapse combined with the debris of the second collapse had made it become pitch black. And that was scary.
Thinking back on that moment when you opened the doors after the second building collapsed and you went outside, and you're seeing people, you're directing them in. Can you believe what you're seeing?
You know, you're not really thinking. You're not thinking you don't have time to process your thoughts and make any conclusions, or you're just reacting to the situation at hand. And, you know, my first instinct was just help direct these guys into the safety of the lobby. And then the second instinct was immediately follow them back into the lobby and don't stay out there breathing that in.
There were some girls, or not.
One time, I'm actually going to change tape before
Okay.
we get too deep in.
I'm trying to speed up the remainder of this.